Hey guys, welcome back to Intelligent Faith 315. This is Pastor Jay. I'd like to welcome you today to a new series we're going to be starting. As you can see behind me, Reason to Believe is a new series we're going to be doing, basically taking you through a foundational apologetics class. So today is going to be part 1 of lesson 1, and it's going to be just an introduction to what is apologetics and why should we even do it. And the way that we're going to lay out the class is that we're going to cover the basic topic of what is apologetics in the first couple of lessons, 4 foundational reasons why we should do it. And then we're going to begin to get into laying a foundation of our knowledge. What is truth? And then can truth be known? After that, we'll get into arguments for God's existence, otherwise known as natural theology. Then we'll get into the evidence of the Old and New Testament scriptures to see if they're a verifiable, trustworthy source. We'll get into the historical evidence for the person Jesus of Nazareth, of Jesus Christ, and then talk about the evidence for his resurrection. And then soon we'll be on the way to establishing the cumulative case for Christianity once we get to that point. So I encourage you to stick with us for the duration of the series, Reason to Believe, a foundational course in Christian apologetics. These lessons are going to be in 15-minute segments, so they're not going to be too long for you. I do encourage you to stick around and join us for the entire series. Now, as I said, today is going to be just a foundational lesson, so if you are kind of a veteran in apologetics, this is very basic stuff, but just to cover all of our fields here, we're going to go through what is apologetics and why do it. So again, Reason to Believe is the title of our class, a rational defense of the Christian worldview. So do encourage you to go to iTunes and check out the podcast that we have. It's also under the same title and the same image you'll find on iTunes. This is going to be the video version of that class. So a good way to define Christian apologetics would be to giving credible answers to culture's questions. There's so many different ways that you could define it. A very technical or more theological definition for apologetics would be the rational and logical defense of the Christian worldview and faith. Or some people would say perhaps giving an answer for why we believe what we believe. And those are all great answers. Another definition you could give for Christian apologetics is simply this: giving credible answers to culture's questions. As we're going to talk about and find out, as I'm sure you're aware, culture has many questions, and apologetics is seeking to give credible answers to those questions. There are good questions, and Christianity has great answers, and this is where Christian apologetics comes into play. So, of course, as Christians, if you're not a believer watching this, then this would really not be for you. But if you are a Christian, we, of course, have a mission as laid out in the Gospels. Of course, the mission is to reach the world for Christ. You know that in Mark 16:15, the commission was given, the commandment actually was given, to go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature under heaven. And then in Matthew's gospel, you have a different version of the Great Commission. I think it's actually better to call it the Great Commandment rather than the Great Commission, but it typically goes by the title of the Great Commission. But it's to go into all the world and to preach the gospel to every creature. To teach what Christ came and said and taught and lived, and take people through all of the words of Christ, the doctrine of the apostles. That's our mission, to bring the good news, the gospel of salvation, to all of mankind. Essentially, in a nutshell, that God has become a man. He has come into our world. He has died for our sins according to the scriptures. He has risen again from the dead according to the scriptures. And through this, the coming of the God-man, the death of the God-man, and the resurrection of the God-man, Jesus Christ, there is salvation as a free gift offered to the world. So that's the mission of the church. And again, if that's the mission, then the message is, well, the gospel is all about God. As I said, God came into the world, the God-man died, the God-man resurrected from the dead, and today the God-man offers forgiveness of sin to anybody who will trust in him and take it. So that's our mission and our message. But then you have to ask yourself, what is the mentality of the world or of the culture that we find ourselves in today? And of course, it varies from place to place, but as you go around the world, much of the world is atheistic, naturalistic, relativistic, and I would even add to that list scientistic. Well, what is that? Well, of course, atheistic is, there's a growing belief today, especially in America, throughout the Western nations and postmodern Europe, of atheism. And of course, this word means no God. Theos. The negative prefix in the Greek language, and theos, no God. So atheism, contrary to whatever you may hear, whatever you may hear out there on YouTube or on various atheist websites. Atheism is the positive belief that there is no God. Atheism is a truth claim. It is a claim to knowledge. It is the positive belief that there is no God. It is not simply the lack of belief. It is the positive belief that there is no God. So this attitude of atheism is abounding in the culture that we are supposed to penetrate and perform our mission and proclaim our message. There's an attitude of atheism, but also of naturalism. And naturalism, of course, is just this idea that there are no supernatural forces at work in the world or the universe. It's simply natural forces and natural law. And so naturalism is an attitude that we have to confront and we come up against today. And it needs to be dealt with. And again, atheism, naturalism, but also relativism. Relativism is the belief that there are no absolute truth claims in the world, that absolute truth does not exist, that absolute truth cannot be known, that you have your truth, I have my truth, and truth is exactly that. It's not absolute, it's relative. And so this is a huge issue. It's one of the major intellectual and philosophical enemies of the Christian church today. So there's an attitude of atheism, naturalism, relativism, and you could even add scientism in the culture today. Scientism is not science. Science is just the Latin word scientia, which means knowledge. Scientism is a philosophical perspective that says that if a truth claim cannot be verified through the language of science, in other words, the language of physics or chemistry, then it is literally meaningless. Which, of course, is self-contradictory because what I just told you, that sentence cannot itself be verified by the language of science, physics, or chemistry. But scientism is widespread in the culture today. And so as we try to perform our mission and spread the message, we run up against this mentality today in the culture of atheism, naturalism, relativism, and scientism. And you could even add to that list pluralism. Pluralism is the belief that all roads lead to God, that all roads are equally true, equally valid, and there are many gods and many roads to God. So what should be our method then? Well, as you can see on the screen behind me, we cannot effectively evangelize the world until we first pre-evangelize them. So in other words, before I can bring the evangel, or the euangelion, which is the Greek name for the gospel, before I can tell the good news about Christ to someone in this type of a culture that is saturated and proliferated with atheism, naturalism, relativism, scientism, and pluralism, before the gospel will make sense to someone, before evangelism can take place, I need to probably do, in most cases, some pre-evangelistic work and remove the rocks from people's minds or hearts and open that up and make way for the gospel. Just like a farmer needs to remove rocks from the ground and prepare the soil so that the seed can be planted, oftentimes today, before evangelism can take place, you need to remove the rocks from the ground or the soil of someone's heart, morally, or their mind, intellectually. Remove those rocks by way of using evidence or apologetics. In other words, helping them understand that atheism is not really a good worldview to take, that naturalism has a lot of philosophical problems, and that relativism, scientism, and pluralism are really incoherent worldviews to take, and they are just full of philosophical and intellectual problems. And so it's just helping people understand that really the most credible and robust worldview that there is the Christian worldview. So if we are to perform our mission and carry our message into the world, we have to penetrate and break through the mentality that's there. How can we do that? Well, with a good method. We must help them see that the personal triune God exists, that immaterial entities exist, and that truth and morality are absolute and objective. All of those components I just told you are part of the Christian worldview and the Christian faith. In other words, Christian apologetics is vital to fulfilling the Great Commission. Now what's going to happen is you're going to come up against a lot of Christians who don't understand or don't agree with what I just told you. They're going to think that Christian apologetics is not for everyone, it's not for today, and it's certainly not vital. But as we're going to see in this first lesson, what is apologetics and why do them? we're going to learn that Christian apologetics is an essential core element of an essential function of the church. Essential function of the churches would be exaltation of God, the edification of the saints, and the evangelism of the world. And so in edification of the saints, teaching them doctrine, and in evangelization of the world, well, Christian apologetics comes into play in both of these areas. And so Christian apologetics is core, and especially in this area of fulfilling the Great Commission going into the world, Christian apologetics has a central and vital role in fulfilling that. So that's good for you to remember. Okay, well, one thing that we need to remember is that, of course, we today as Christians, we are attacked by critics. The Christian worldview, the Christian faith, the Christian philosophy is attacked by critics. The man you can see behind me is John Dominic Crossan. As you can see, he's with the Jesus Seminar, and he wrote that book on the left side of the screen here, The Five Gospels. And basically what John Dominic Crossan and the Jesus Seminar would have you believe, based upon their writings and what they've published, is that 82% of the Gospels are false, 16% of the Gospels are doubtful, 0% of the Gospel of John is true, Jesus was not God, the resurrection did not happen, and the reason why we did not find the body of Jesus is because, well, his body was eaten by dogs, and so of course the disciples made a horrible mistake and they believe in the resurrection. So this is one of the realities of the world today, is that the Christian worldview, the Christian faith, is attacked by critics such as the Jesus Seminar. This is what we call higher biblical criticism, and so these kind of critics need to be answered. The manuscripts, the documents that we hold to, the Old and the New Testament, are they verifiable? Are they trustworthy? Are they legitimate? How is the canon of Scripture established? Has it been reliably transmitted and translated and preserved and passed down to us? Is there archaeological evidence behind it? Is there historical evidence behind it? What about the scientific statements that are in Scripture? What about the philosophical statements that are in Scripture? So it's attacked by critics, number one. Number two, it's also attacked by the cults. As you can see on the magazine on the left, Time Magazine, the tragedy in Waco, Texas, David Koresh and the Branch Davidians. You have the Jehovah's Witnesses in the middle, the Awake magazine. And then also we have on the right the Jonestown Massacre, the Cult of Death, where this gentleman, Jim Jones, he led hundreds of people to their death by ingesting arsenic. And of course, these are cults. They all deny the orthodoxy of Christianity. In other words, they all teach something to the effect of that Jesus is not God, or Jesus is one of many gods, or one of these cult leaders themselves happen to be God. And so Christianity is faced by another attack. It is the attack by the cults. These are heretical attacks from, in a sense, within the church. These are not Christians because they are not within Orthodox Christianity, but they claim the banner of Christianity. They claim to flock under the banner of Christianity. And so they're heretical groups. They are heterodox or unorthodox groups. And the Christian church from the very beginning has had to deal with groups like this. And so, number two, a second reason for apologetics is we are attacked by the cults, and all of them deny Orthodox Christianity. And by the way, the first one, attacked by the critics, they all deny the historical nature of Christianity. Attacked by the critics, attacked by the cults, and then attacked by the culture. So here you can see the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown on the left. This was made into a movie starring Tom Hanks, great actor, but horrible history. Dan Brown is not an academic. He hasn't studied Christian history in depth. This is obvious from his writings. Then you have books like the one in the middle, The Secrets of Judas, the story of the misunderstood disciple and his lost gospel. So the Gospel of Judas, this is a Gnostic document from, I believe, the 4th century. And people claim that there's information in here that makes the Gospels look unreliable. And then, of course, you have TV documentaries like The Lost Tomb of Jesus and other types of films and documentaries that are coming out. And these are all seeking to undermine the historical nature of the Christian faith. So there's attacks by the critics, attacks by the cults, and attacks by the culture. And so these are great reasons for a defense of the Christian faith, which is what we call apologetics. So basically, in this first lesson, which is going to be divided up into probably 3 or 4 different parts, 15 minutes each, In our first lesson, what is apologetics and why do it? We're going to be covering 3 basic points. Number 1, what is apologetics? Number 2, what is its role in evangelism? And then number 3, why do we need to do apologetics? So again, if you're into apologetics, this is basic stuff for you, but just cruise with us through this lesson anyway, and it's just good for you to refresh yourself. If you are not familiar with this material, you really need to lay a good foundation here, because this is going to help you get a good sense of what is apologetics, the biblical nature of it, the historical nature of it, and why it should be practiced. So question number 1, what is apologetics? Well, one way to define it is it's giving a reason for our hope. It is giving a logical, rational reason for the hope that is within us. And of course, we get this from 1 Peter 3:15. Peter tells us, always being prepared to give a reason for the hope that is within you. And of course, in Greek, this phrase, give a reason for, is the word apologia. This word apologia, it's a Greek word that means to give a rational, logical defense for what you believe. It can be used in a court of law. It can be used just by giving an explanation of a set of beliefs. It's used 18 times in the New Testament. And so that's a great way to understand apologetics, giving a logical, rational, systematic reason for why you believe what you believe. My 15 minutes are up here, so I'll just finish this point and then we'll continue on with part 2. Giving a logical, rational reason for why you believe what you believe. And 1 Peter 3:15 is really the battle cry of most apologists today. Always being ready to give a reason or to give a defense for the hope that is within you. And of course, within the early Christian church, this usually took the form of standing before a Roman governor or a body of Roman officials and giving a logical answer or a reasonable explanation as to why Christians should not be persecuted or why Christianity should be believed. And historically speaking, we know that if the apologist, the defender of the faith, whether it was a pastor or a bishop or a deacon or just a Christian member of a church, if they failed in their apology, if they failed in their defense of the faith, whether it was through writing or an oral presentation, they would oftentimes become martyred. And so apologetics, from the very beginning of Peter's writings here in the 1st century, all the way through the history of the Christian church, has been practiced. And so we can understand it, number 1, by giving a reason for the hope that is within us. That's all we'll do for today. That's part 1 of lesson 1, why do apologetics and what is apologetics? So stick around with us for the duration of the series, and do encourage you to go over to our mother website if you're not there already, intelligentfaith315.com, and check out the articles that we have. You can subscribe and get the articles and videos sent to your email account. You can send us some questions. If you're watching this on the Intelligent Faith 315 website, go over to our YouTube channel, and all of our video content is posted there. And don't forget, on iTunes, our Reason to Believe podcast in audio form is there as well. So we'll see you next time for part 2. Until then, have an intelligent faith.